Okay, it's 9:31. We will call the November 15th, 2024 IRL Council Board of Directors meeting to order. To start our meeting, if everyone would stand, and we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And before we move further, I'm just for the audience to know, if you're here from the public and you wanted to speak, you will have that opportunity, but I would ask you to fill out a speaker's form. And we don't have anybody? Okay, well, somebody could come in. All right, thank you very much. In order to get started, we've got some new faces up here, quite a few. So I would just ask if we would start at the end to my left and just introduce yourself. And if you're sitting in for someone else, just let us know who you are. We're glad to have you here. This is a tremendous council. We work well together, so it's nice to have you here this morning.
Good morning. I'm Libby Pigman. I'm the External Affairs Director for South Florida Water Management District, and I am sitting in for one of our governing board members. And so I serve as the alternate when our governing board members are not able to be here.
Good morning. I'm Aaron Watkins with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. I'm the director in the Central District Regulatory Office in Orlando.
Good morning. I'm Commissioner Jamie Fowler with St. Lucie County, filling in as an alternate for Commissioner Chris Sadowski.
Good morning. I'm Eric Charist, the Assistant Director for the Natural Resource Department of Indian River County, and I'm filling in for Commissioner Ehrman this morning.
And I am Jeff Brower, the Volusia County Council Chair.
Good morning. Cole Oliver, sitting in for Doug Bornick for the St. John's Water Management District.
Good morning. Rob Feltner, Brevard County Board of County Commissioners.
All right. Thank you very much. I believe we do have some guests as well. Wade Lehman is here from Ocean, and tell us where you're from.
I am with EPA, Region 4. I manage our ocean and estuarine management section out of that, which includes our National Estuary Program, as well as our South Florida program and a few other items. And let me say that our Water Division Director, who is planning to be here today, sends her regards and her regrets for not being able to make this meeting. Something came up at the last minute. But thank you for having me. I do appreciate you having us here. I've met some of you in the past, but obviously not most of you. My experience was I started at the agency as a toxicologist, so I was very interested in aquatic interactions with chemicals and pollutants and things like that, and now I manage an entire group that does that across the scope of both coasts of Florida. I also want to say really quickly, I have a huge amount of appreciation for what the board does and what the NEP staff do. They've been amazing to work with. I don't say this lightly, they're one of our best NEPs. They leverage more, they do more. It's an incredible group. So anyway, thank you for having me today, and I appreciate being here.
We're glad to have you here. And I believe that we have listening online Jennifer DeMeo, who's a member of our management board. She is. Welcome, Jennifer. Glad to have you here. And then Dr. DeFries, I would recognize you as our esteemed leader and ask that you would introduce your staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'd like to introduce a new member of our staff. Kevin Walker has joined us as a result of funding on our NOAA grant. He has hit the ground running. He comes to us, and we did a competitive search back in August, September, and he comes to us from a really long DOD experience looking at federal grants, federal compliance, work. His last career place was up in Titusville with Knight's Armament. And so he's going to bring a tremendous amount of capacity for us and for Dan. You'll see later in the meeting, we've got a big year coming up when it comes to contract management. And he has already, been just a huge asset for us. Before I let staff go around the room, I do want to recognize KJ is listening in from Texas, working remotely. You'll look around and say, well, where's Dan?
Yeah.
Dan and Kalita are representing us and myself up in New York this week at our fall tech transfer meeting with the Association of National Estuary Programs. And so they'll be back sometime on the weekend. And so you're going to have to bear with me on the budget today. But yeah, we're really happy to have Dan and Kalita up there. All 28 NEP directors meet twice a year, once in DC in the spring, and then we rotate around sites in the fall to talk the really big things happening with NEPs. And I'm going to turn it over to Kathy, and will staff just introduce yourself.
Kathy Hill, Deputy Director. Aaron Bergman, Administrative Coordinator.
I'm Jesse Wales.
Kevin Walker, Project Manager.
All right, thank you very much.
We forgot our lawyer.
Yes,
Hi,
we did.
Ruth Holmes with Torsivia, Donlan, Godot, and Rubin.
Thank you, and welcome to everybody. All right, we will we'll move along to the to any agenda revisions. If any council member has a revision that they would like to note, there are two changes. A staff revision 9 on the consent agenda. Holly Sweat to replace Dr. Valerie Paul for the Smithsonian Field Station STEM AC. And then agenda item 11B, 2025 meeting calendar. The staff found a conflict with Veterans Day, and Aaron will present revised calendar. Are there any other revisions from the council? No. Anything else you would like to add, Dr. DeFries?
No, that's it.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda then?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Did you get them both? Made the motion. Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the agenda is approved unanimously. I don't believe we have any resolutions, special recognitions, letter of awards, unless anything's changed since this morning. There are not. And no public comments?
No comments.
Okay. Is anyone here from the public who wanted to speak? Okay. Water quality reports. Lauren Hall for the Northern and Central Lagoon. After all of our storms, this should be really interesting. I hope it's positive.
Good morning. I'm Lauren Hall with the St. Johns River Water Management District, and I'll be presenting the conditions report for the Northern and Central IRL. Before I get into the data from our water quality sampling, I just wanted to go ahead and remind everyone how much rain we've had the last few months. So we came out of a fairly dry spring and early summer, and then got whopped with these storms. So August, September, and October are the figures that you see here. You can see that the rainfall was not evenly distributed throughout the Lagoon Basin, but still was a fair bit of rainfall across the board. All right, now moving on to the data, what that has done to the data. Just to remind you, we have 6 continuous water quality monitoring stations that are maintained by the Water Management District. We have a site in Southern Mosquito Lagoon, a site in Titusville on the pier. We have a site in Cocoa in the main part of the IRL, a site in Banana River Lagoon, a site just outside of O'Galley River, and a site in Vero Beach just north of State Road 60. These are continuous monitors that record data every hour, and they are on telemetry, so we can pull that data up through our website, and the public can do the same anytime they want. So here's some of the data. This is showing depth from August through November 2024. And you can see that those two storms, when they hit, did these little blips on depth, but for the most part, depth has remained fairly consistent. This is fall, which is when we tend to have our highest water levels. We expect to see this water level drop sometime in later this winter, probably in January or so. Just want to point out an anomaly here that we're seeing for the Mosquito Lagoon site. This is a sensor malfunction. For the subsequent slides and the rest of the data, I'm going to be pulling out this little section of data. Another part that I wanted to point out, and it was hard to see with all the other sites there, is the Banana River Lagoon Station. After the passage of Hurricane Milton, we actually lost the data logger. It came apart, fell into the lagoon, and so we lost a little bit of that telemeter data. We do still have data that was recorded on the data logger. It's on the sonde itself that we're hoping we're going to be able to recover. But so this section of data will be missing on subsequent slides. It has been repaired, and we do have a new data logger out there now. Okay, moving on to salinity. You can see the passage of the storms here caused these blips in salinity to decline somewhat. We had between 25 and 35 PSU leading up to these storms, and now you can see that we've lost about 5 PSU. The Vero station is the station that tends to see a lot more fluctuation. If you recall from the previous slide, the depth at the Vero station is shallower than the others, and this is just the position of the sonde itself in the water column, so it tends to be impacted by the salinity a little bit more than some of the other sites. Moving on to temperature. We do see a decline in temperature with the cooler season on its way, but we haven't really had any severe cold snaps yet, and that's evident in the data. We don't really see anything dramatic happening yet. Moving on to dissolved oxygen. Once we reach 2 milligrams per liter, that tends to be the point where things are starting to affect the wildlife out there. And you can see that for the most part, we don't have anything below that 2 milligrams per liter, with the exception of this little blip here at the Titusville station. But again, similar to the Mosquito Lagoon station, this is actually just a sensor anomaly. We were having problems after the passage of Hurricane Milton with our wiper blade, and so that particular sensor was getting fouled, which is causing this decline. So we didn't actually get a decline below 2 milligrams per liter. It was just a sensor problem. Moving on to chlorophyll A. Again, the passage of the storms is when you tend to see these little kick-ups in some of this, depending on what the conditions have been leading up, we can get that nutrient pulse when we have storms come through that can cause phytoplankton blooms out there. But the good news is we really have not seen any widespread blooms. We're getting these short-lived blooms that just pop up here and there, but they usually dissipate fairly quickly. Nothing really widespread covering a large section of the lagoon, so that's been really good news. Even with the passage of these storms, we're not seeing widespread blooms. Turbidity, I hardly even have to show you where the storms are. You can probably see it pretty obviously, especially in the Mosquito Lagoon site. This site is, Mosquito Lagoon in general is shallower and things tend to kick up very quickly there. But the good news is you can probably see it settles back out just as quickly as it kicked up, so that's great. Moving on to FDOM, so this is an indication of how much color is in the water. The sites that are near our tributaries are the sites that tend to have the highest color, which is why I have the Vero site on a different scale bar there. You can see the passage of the storms caused a bit of an increase in FDOM, but again, nothing really out of the ordinary for this time of year. So what has all of this rainfall done to our water clarity? A Secchi depth is one of the ways that we measure water clarity. The lower the Secchi depth, the less clear the water is. The greater the Secchi depth, the more you can see through the water column. And so even with the passage of storms in September and October, you can see that we actually have had an improvement through a lot of the lagoon, especially the northern lagoon and southern Mosquito Lagoon. But I will caution you that the data that I'm showing here for October was pre-Milton. So we do expect to see some declines in our Secchi after the passage of the storms, and we just got that data about a week ago, so we're still working that up and doing our QA on that. Okay, so moving on to seagrasses. Last time I was here, I presented on the 2023 seagrass map, which is the green bars that you can see there. And you can see we had a slight uptick in our hectares, our seagrass extent from maps. But what I'm presenting today, in addition to that, is the new data that we have from our seagrass transects, our in-water monitoring for summer 2024. And you can see that in addition to that uptick that we were seeing in 2023, we have an increase in mean transect length, which is shown with the black line, and a little bit of an increase in our mean transect cover that is shown with the gray line. So, but where has this increase happened? It has not been throughout the entire lagoon, and I believe I mentioned that last time with the seagrass maps for 2023, that a lot of our increase was in the northern lagoon and in Mosquito Lagoon. So similar with our transect data for 2024, it was not a lagoon-wide increase, and so I just want to give you a few examples of where we are seeing that seagrass increase in percent cover. If you look at the top left figure first, the Epcot site, this is in the northern Indian River Lagoon along the eastern shore just north of Hollover Canal. And you can see that in 2024, our mean seagrass cover did increase quite a bit. We had almost no seagrass in 2023, and we did see that increase in 2024. We are still a long way away from where we were back in 2011, 2012. So, you know, of course, this is a positive change, but we still have a long way to go. Moving across to the biolab site, highlighted in pink, you can see that the increase in seagrass happened a little bit earlier. We did see that uptick in 2023. And the great news is that 2024, that seagrass remained. So even with any grazing pressure that we have up in that area, we still had a really nice seagrass bed in 2024. Then shifting down to the Cars Park site in northern Banana River Lagoon, similar to what we saw at Epcot, we had an increase in 2024 from almost no seagrass in 2023. So again, really positive changes at that spot. Unfortunately, moving over to the central IRL, the shooter site that we have along the western shore north of 192 Causeway, we have not seen any increase in our seagrass cover at all. That site consists mostly of Caulerpa prolifera, which is a benthic macroalgae, an attached macroalgae. I did want to just give you a little glimpse, even though I'm supposed to be just telling you about northern and central IRL, I wanted to show you a site down in the southern IRL. This is at Midway Road. It's south of Fort Pierce Inlet along the western shore. And we did see a little bit of an increase in 2024, again, a long way away from what we had back in 2009 and 2010, but we did see that little increase. However, the increase that we saw was mostly Haliduli rhytii, shoalgrass, and some of our smaller Halophilus species. This site used to be a continuous grass bed of Syringodium or manatee grass. And so we're seeing a bit of a species change here, and that's something that we're going to keep a close eye on. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions from anyone in the council? Just two quick questions. What do you see as the factors that were affecting the loss of seagrass? So the factors affecting the loss, a lot of it is really related to light, how much light is reaching the bottom. And so when we have substantial phytoplankton blooms and long-lasting phytoplankton blooms that cut down on that light, the seagrass is going to respond negatively. They can respond to other things, temperature, salinity, but light is really the main driver in where we see those seagrass losses. So is that related to turbidity? It could be turbidity, it could be higher color, but in this case, most of this is related to phytoplankton blooms. Yeah. Okay. That answers my second question too. Dr. DeFries.
Lauren, we had a really robust discussion both in the STEM AC and also the management board about, why aren't we seeing more at the inlets, which a lot of us assumed, and also going back to our very beginning, this concept that all you have to do is pop a new inlet in and everything's going to be right. And Lauren did a great job kind of addressing the complexity of these issues. Do you mind sharing that with the board?
Sure.
I thought that was excellent conversation we had.
I think we often underestimate how complex it is for seagrass to come back in an area. And so we're seeing this recovery in northern IRL and southern Mosquito Lagoon, but not seeing it in other areas that we might expect to see, such as the inlet. Central IRL is really just not recovering at all. So why is that happening? Why are we seeing it in one place and not another? And I think it's a combination of factors. I think you have to have a source of seagrass, for one. So whether that be vegetative fragments or a seed bank from seagrass seeds that have built up over time. So that has to be present. You have to have the right conditions in the sediment for those seeds to germinate or for the seeds to survive, seedlings to survive. But you also have to have the right water quality conditions for those to survive long term. And so it comes back to this multi-factor reason why we're seeing recovery in some areas and not seeing it in other areas. And that's also complicated then by, well, what is the grazer situation out there and how are the grazers impacting things? The example I showed you in Mosquito Lagoon, in 2023 we saw this great increase and there was a lot of seagrass that came back very quickly, and in 2024 we had just as much, even though we had a lot of grazing pressure in that area. So it's a really complicated, complex, many different factors that are influencing why that happens. In Sebastian, again, just a lot of different factors, and one of the things that we're seeing in Sebastian that we're not seeing in the northern lagoon is the presence of a macroalgae called Dapis, and this algae is covering a lot of the seagrass, and you've probably seen it. It's like a brown, very aerated type of algae, and it's covering a lot of the seagrass down there, and there's some concern that that could be hindering some of the recovery. So a lot of factors.
Thank you. We have an experiment going on in the Edgewater area on a clam lease, and we're seeing tremendous growth in oysters, clams, and almost no growth in seagrass. But it's our experiment has something underwater about 24 inches, and you can't even see it. You can't see your feet in the water. It's so the clarity, and it looks like it's phytoplankton, mostly. So we're hoping that clears up this winter.
Well, hopefully the clams and the oysters will start to filter some of that out.
Oysters are thriving, so yeah, that's a good sign. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Dr. Melanie Parker for the Southern Lagoon report.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Melanie Parker. I work for the South Florida Water Management District, and I'll do an update on the Southern IRL, really focused on the St. Lucie estuary today. So the figure on this slide shows total daily inflows into the estuary from each of the basins. And you can see we had some big spikes associated with those storm events. The first spike is actually a local heavy rainfall event. That smaller spike in the middle around 9/27, that's Hurricane Helene, and the large spike again in early October, that's Milton. The good news is most of that inflow was watershed. Maybe that's not completely good news, but it's not coming from Lake Okeechobee. There have been no releases from Lake Okeechobee into the St. Lucie estuary since March 30th earlier this year. So this is all coming primarily from the tidal basin and the C23 and 24 basins. So if you look at the table on the bottom right, that's just an average inflow from each of those basins for the most recent 7-day period. You can see that total inflows to the estuary were right around 900 CFS, which is much lower than we saw associated with that those storms that happened in September and October. So hopefully this means we're heading into the dry season and those rains are going to decrease and flows will decrease a bit. So this will show us how salinities are responding to those inflows. First, the map on the right shows where our salinity monitoring sites are located in the estuary. These are continuous monitoring sites at the blue locations. I've also got the Rio Oyster Station marked on this map because I'm going to show some oyster data in a couple slides. So if we look at the table on the top left, this is showing average 7-day salinities at those 3 salinity monitoring sites. The bold numbers are the most recent 7-day period. The numbers in parentheses are the previous week. So you can see salinities came up a little bit at HR1, which is the North Fork. They're still pretty low. We've got about 4 on the surface and 5 on the bottom. At the US 1 Bridge site, which is what we would consider the central estuary. We've got about 8 on the surface and bottom. And at the A1A bridge, which is our most downstream location, we've got 20 on the surface and 24 on the bottom. Now, oysters are an indicator species for recover and SERP in the estuary, so we really look at salinity's relation to oysters as they are representing estuarine species. So if we look at those salinities and relay them back to the salinity performance measure ranges, which are shown in the table on the bottom, you can see that at HR1 and the US1 bridge, those salinities are below the optimal range for oysters. They're below 10. In fact, HR1 on the surface is below the stressful range, even in that damaging range. If salinities are in the damaging range, which is below 5, in the warmer part of the year, up to 2 weeks, that can cause oyster mortalities throughout the estuary. So we want to get those back up. At least the US1 bridge is in the stressful range, which is 5 to 9. They can tolerate that for a little bit longer period of time. And then salinities have come down enough at the A1A bridge that they're actually in the optimal range of 10 to 25 for oysters. So the figure on the top is just showing the salinities at those same 3 locations. It's daily salinity, so you can see how it's varied related to all the storms we had the last few months. But it is on the rise, which is good news. The figure on the bottom is showing the average water column salinity at the US1 site, which is located most closely to that oyster monitoring site. And you can see that in mid-September, those salinities dropped down below optimal into that yellow band of 5 to 9. And have pretty much stayed there since. It's been about 9 weeks, with a few excursions even lower into the less than 5 range. So things haven't been ideal for oysters and estuarine organisms in that part of the estuary for about 2.5 months now. But they are increasing, and we're hoping that as we move further into the dry season, we'll see those salinities return to the optimal range at that location. So we do have some oyster data. FWC does the monitoring for us at the Rio station. These are showing SPAT settlement, or juvenile oyster settlement rates at the Rio station for the last 3 years. And if you look at the last third of the graph, that's showing 2024. You can see that this year's spawning started in late March, early April, with a recruitment rate of 1.3 spat per shell. And it increased to about 3 spat per shell for May and June. But then we saw a big decrease to less than 1, and it's remained below 1 since that time. And that's likely because those lower salinities were probably killing the larvae that were in the water column. They're much less tolerant of low salinities than the adult oysters are. So hopefully we'll get better spat results next year. This is showing oyster density. So this is the number of oysters settled on the bottom on a reef at the same location. They do these measures quarterly, so that's why there's less data. If you look again at 2024, the numbers are a little bit lower than what we saw in 23, but they're pretty consistent, which is good news, and even a little bit higher in this last measure in September. So what this is telling me is that although we may have lost most of the larvae settling this year, the adults that were settled on the bottom were able to withstand those lower salinities, and they're going to be there to spawn again next spring. And so that will increase the rate of recovery for these oyster reefs. And that's all I have, unless there are questions.
Any questions? Looks like you're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For item 7, we will have an update from Dr. Dwayne DeFries and Kevin Walker on the NOAA project and the progress that we're making there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Because of the scope and scale of this project, we are probably going to bring you almost quarterly an update on where we are in the NOAA project. And when we saw you back in August, we hadn't signed the grant award. And a lot has happened in the last 90 days, so I wanted to bring you up to speed. I've got Kevin here to back me up if I can't remember how many contracts he's got in negotiation, so be ready. I may call on you. But we have moved quickly, and I want to just take this moment to say thank you to the entire NOAA staff. It has been very much like our long-term relationship with EPA. I mean, really a pleasure. They have been there moving forward with us on every aspect of this project. They have a lot of vested interest in this. It's not something they normally would do. Most of their projects historically have been giant, Gulf of Mexico, and we're in a different zone on this. So where are we today? The grant award actually happened just a few days after we saw you in August, and that grant award is now signed. The effective date was 10/1, but we actually fast-tracked certain components of this that were largely being funded by us from the interlocal agreement. I'm going to show you where that is. The federal cost share is $9.38 million, and the total project cost is $10.7 million, and that's spread over the 3-year period. And so we are in year 1, quarter 1 of what will be a 36-month effort. I do want to mention that we really advanced making sure that the public and you and your staffs could see what's going on. And so KJ has created an independent story map of all of the project sites and partners, and with Kathy, a summary of this proposal. And so you can go online at onelagoon.org, see who is doing what and where, even though we have not yet expended a single dollar. We're getting a lot of questions about, what is this $9 million plus going to? So if you can't find that data or you need more, just contact me directly. You can imagine, we've got a staff of 8. We brought Kevin on under the contract, and so he is a contractor within this budget. He's with us for 36 months. It's a straight contract, no benefits, but a $9.4 million increase in our budget challenges us from a human capacity. And you see this every quarter, and you'll see it again. Typically, we're running 35, 40 contracts a year with our normal business. And so we sat down as a team and said, okay, how do we reorganize what we do and incentivize and empower staff to take different pieces of this where we're all working together within the council, but we're reaching out to our partners. And I'm not going to go through these individually, but everybody's got a oversight role to play here, whether it's community engagement, habitat restoration, communications, contract management, especially the federal oversight side of this. No big surprise, I think, to most of you since you're in government, but how EPA handles, all the accounting and the financing and also some of the oversight is not the same way NOAA does. And so we've got separate lines of revenue, separate lines of expenditures, but also different compliance requirements based on those revenue streams. And you will see in the budget an adjustment to address that increased workload. So where are we right at the moment? There are a number of contract requirements that are still pending. So even though we have a grant award, there are conditions on that award, and we are working as a team. We have 10 subcontracts that are ongoing right now. We have 6? 7. So this week it was 6 like 2 days ago. You've closed 1 and 7. We're moving through these sub-awards. We also have direct subcontracts with us. And so they're moving forward, but these conditions are both challenging and unique opportunities. So when we put this proposal forward, which was a transformational habitat restoration grant, one of the transformational outcomes was to take our lagoon-wide community of practice, all 5 counties, multiple agencies, multiple organizations, and use this as a guideline to start to bring habitat restoration practices, habitat restoration monitoring, and then data management and monitoring under a single line. You can imagine that's not easy. Kind of herding cats, because some of our partners have been doing this for 20 years, and we're asking them to shift a little bit. NOAA has very specific monitoring requirements under this grant, and they're very different than what most of you have seen at the Water Management District or your counties. And so it's a tiered monitoring system where the first tier is implementation monitoring. Did you plan something? Did you build it? And after 3 years, did it survive? And if it didn't, was that an external impact that you had no control over, like a Hurricane Milton, or was there some design flaw that you have to accommodate as you're moving forward? And then where most of us have thought for many years, this effectiveness or performance monitoring is not part of this grant. So one of the things we'll be doing over the course of the next 36 months is asking the question, number one, how do we finance those additional years to see what those reefs and seagrass beds look like, not in the 36 months, but maybe in the 5-year framework. And so we don't have answers to that after this grant, but we are definitely moving to a monitoring plan, which we'll share with everybody. We have to do a data management sharing plan, and that is right now under the supervision of KJ. We're going to try to centralize and standardize all data that comes into our shop, and that is going to be through an app that KJ is working on. So if I'm in the field taking the normal field notes on waterproof paper, at some point you're going to get back to your laboratory, or your county office, and you're going to load that where it's all coming through a portal. So we've got both raw data and metadata. It is our intent that if we get this right, then from this grant proposal on, starting with our normal RFP process next year, and we are in that call right now that every project that comes through us is going to be following these same metrics year to year to year. And there's going to be some challenges along the way. So incremental learning is definitely going to be part of this, both on NOAA's part and ours. Imagine 10 partners, 15 different sites, 8 different habitat types spread across the lagoon. Our CECs are going to be engaging with each of the regions, but we're going to be communicating together on a regular basis. Kevin has been hired. We're at 7 contract subawards already, executed, 3 more to go. The data entry and management, you'll hear a little more detail maybe later, but we have done a lot in 90 days. Next slide. Oh, that's me. One of the aspects that we were able to put together, and we've had this discussion both in the management conference and with you all, the power of having some, discretionary funds within our budget. So reserve funds that we know we're going to use but aren't, directed to a single purpose at the time. And this is a perfect example of how powerful, having some discretionary opportunity. So NOAA requires that we look at socioeconomics as part of this grant. Many of you may remember back in 2016, the Brevard County Save Our Indian River Lagoon program did an economic assessment, and then we also had a full lagoon assessment at the regional planning councils with the state of Florida. And so everybody has been asking the question, when are you going to update these economic assessments? And the answer has been, when we have enough money, because what we paid back in 2016 is not what this costs today, like everything else. We've been able to leverage this grant, use some of our council dollars, and we have already started this in advance of the grant award under our continuing service contract with the Balmoral Group, who's done a lot of economic analysis for us. And I want to show you what we've got and what's going to come. So what is in draft form in our office, but not for full public disclosure until NOAA gets a look at it and blesses the process, is that we went ahead and did what I would call a traditional socioeconomic baseline, not just for the 5 counties on the lagoon, but also the 2 counties in the watershed. So they looked at Okeechobee County and also Palm Beach County. And we think that alone is going to be of value to all of our partners and especially those that are doing their own economic valuations. It gives you an independent comparison. And every time you do this with different methodology, you're going to see different results. Moving forward, however, we'll parse out Okeechobee County and also Palm Beach County, because we really want to see if we can use this proposal and the grant to deliver some hard numbers about cost benefit. So we've got 15 sites. Balmoral has identified a number of those sites as case studies, and I'll mention one. We have a wetland restoration with St. Johns River Water Management District, 2,000 acres. It's the only what I would call traditional, dike removal. And so that, by its very nature, becomes one of those case studies. But with each of these project sites and each of the habitat types, we have hard construction data, as we move forward, both budgeted and as we get down towards the back end of this, expended. Where we're going to be challenged, and challenged mainly because we haven't done this work in the Lagoon, is what is the benefit side? And we had a really good discussion in the CAC, or maybe it was the management board, about, social capital, human capital, environmental capital, infrastructure capital. Some of those components of a full economic analysis are way beyond the scope of this project, but it's our intent in that case study move to tasks 2 and 3 that we'll have socioeconomic benefits to include ecosystem service benefits. And then we will take the body of peer-reviewed economic data. For example, there's a lot of data from Chesapeake on oysters and Long Island and Sound, and come up and expand what we're doing to see if we can come up with really relatively tight metrics. But we all know that any economic study these days, it's a much shorter time for change. So stay tuned on this. This is going to deliver sooner than the 3 years. We're hoping maybe by this time next year that we'll have draft reports, put it out for review, basically peer review it through all of you and your staff, and then come back and then put that document on the street as a final document. Other project deliverables, some of which came on board when we were negotiating this contract, because NOAA is very excited about making sure that we do this complicated project almost as a case study for not one big project, but lots of little projects that come together as a transformational moment. So we've got some additional sensors paid for this, which will help us with some of the sediment muck flux. We haven't decided how we're going to deploy yet. We're having those discussions. We have 15 undergraduate internships that will be connected with our priority communities. So the question the other day was, where is the human capital value? It's going to be in those 15 internships, and we're working right now to build kind of the plan, the broad plan for where those interns will reside over the course of this next 36 months. We will not, as the council, be supervising interns. We will be overseeing those deliveries to make sure there's high quality for the participants. And what we're hoping is that it actually changes lives, changes careers, just changes understanding. We're going to have a lot of outreach, and so be aware. We may be calling on you or your staffs to come out in the field with us, because some of your staff are kind of embedded in this project. But one large project video, and Kathy's going to be coordinating that with our CECs, and then each one of those sites will have a site-specific video about the site, the habitat type, the value proposition of the site. And then also, thanks to NOAA, they said, do you have any plan for, engineered as-built, which we did not put into the proposal. And they said, you really should do that. So Tetra Tech, under our continuing service agreement, will be doing those engineered as-builts. It's going to be kind of interesting to see what an as-built looks like when you're putting clams out in the water. That one I'm scratching my head on, but for our oyster reefs, our shorelines, our wetland restoration. That will give us really hard documentation at the end of construction. So with that, I'm going to just open up for questions. We are going to keep driving quickly till the holidays to try to get the documents that we need to get to NOAA for their review. The economic study is already on their plate. The monitoring plan, probably the data management plan, we'll be going back and forth. But each quarter we'll bring you up to speed on probably not this deep a dive. And then at some point when we're actually doing the work, we're going to bring these partners in kind of on a rotating basis to give you an update on what they have going. But all 5 counties have projects. And so everybody got a little piece of this pie. And at the end of the day, I'm hoping that we've got this community of practice, combination of volunteers, public agencies, and also private sector contracts that come out of this working together, sharing knowledge, and that becomes the corpus of what I like to call the workforce that we didn't have before. It's all been done project by project and never on a systems-wide basis. And I'm really interested to see what that looks like in pure economic value when you start adding. I think we had 2,400 projected volunteers just for this project doing work in the ground. So that's what I have for you today.
Any questions? Thank you for the update.
Thank you. Oops.
That takes us to item 8, the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program Management Conference Committee reports, and we will start with Beth Powell from the Management Board.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I would just like to report that on November 12th, the Indian River Lagoon Council Board, Management Board convened at the Sebastian Elementary School beginning at 10:17. There were 30 attendees in person, and there were 15 attendees online. And the meeting was called to order at 10:17, 2 minutes late, my fault. There were no agenda revisions, and the minutes from the August 20th meeting were approved unanimously without any changes. Stu Glass provided the Finance Subcommittee report, and the board accepted the committee's report. I will make a note that there was a call to volunteers and interested parties to serve on the Finance Subcommittee, and the board is committed to assisting with that, and we would like to make that publicly known as well, so that if anyone is interested, they can contact any of the IRL staff, myself, or any of the management board members to get more information. Lauren Hall presented the water quality report for St. Johns River Water Management District, and Aaron graciously provided the report on behalf of South Florida Water Management District. We then had presentations by Space Florida WRF Study. Pete Eggert, for the VP for Environmental Health and Safety, gave a presentation with his colleague Stephen, and they gave us an update of what's happening. And this is all very conceptual at this point in time. However, the need is real fast and coming quick to our area. And so, as Dwayne had noted during the meeting, having this information up front provides us an opportunity to engage with Space Florida, and also to be aware of what the plans are and to address issues or topics that come up, but also to lead this charge so that we're combining the health of the Indian River Lagoon along with the need that is presented at this time. Dwayne also provided a NOAA Transformational Habitat Restoration Grant Award update, similar to what you just received. There were some great questions for both of these topics from our management board. We have dialogue going back and forth, and I think it revealed some of the excitement that we have around the NOAA Transformational Grant. And we would like to extend our warm welcome to Kevin. Welcome aboard. And we'd like to thank staff for the enormous lift for this grant. So I'm the kind of person who always looks at these kinds of opportunities, and when you take them on, they're a big challenge. When you receive the award, there's a bigger challenge ahead. So we would just like to extend our appreciation for staff. This is taking on an enormous amount of work, but also an enormous benefit to the Indian River Lagoon. And if we set our sights even beyond knowing that this project will be successful, it also lays the groundwork for future funding. So we would just like to thank all of the staff for your efforts, and if there's any way we can assist, of course, let us know. There was no there was no old business to discuss, and thus the meeting moved forward with the new business, and the following items were unanimously approved with one minor change noted for the 2025 meeting calendar. The Management Board provides a recommendation to the Board of Directors to accept the requested actions. Dwayne provided staff's recommendation for approval of the fiscal year 2025 final budget amendment, which was unanimously approved by the Management Board by Resolution 2024-007. The Indian River Lagoon Council meeting calendar for 2025 was presented by Aaron, and the November date to be scheduled at a later time due to conflict with Veterans Day. All other dates were unanimously approved. The request for qualifications for grant writing services to replace vacancies and expand the list of contractors was unanimously approved by the board with a recommendation to the Board of Directors to authorize staff to develop and release RFQs for grant writing services for the purpose of replacing vacancies and to expand the list of contractors for future grant writing services. Staff presented the IRL NEP reports, including community engagement, information tech and data science, IRL project update, and the executive director's report was presented by Dwayne. Final comments from members and the public concluded the meeting with an announcement for the next meeting date of February 11th, 2025 at 10:15 a.m. And the meeting ended at approximately 1:15 p.m. The board would also like to extend our condolences to the family and friends of Dr. Graham Cox and Marty Baum, leaders, advocates, and volunteers who dedicated time and resources for the health of the Indian River Lagoon and well-being of the Indian River Lagoon communities. I would like to just let you know that Marty's service was held on November 9th, and there was a really lovely tribute and story about his work and passions for the IRL in the TC Palm, so I would encourage you to take a look at that. Dr. Cox's celebration of life will be held at the Pelican Island Audubon House on December 14th from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Dr. Cox was noted for his volunteer efforts and expertise in ecological economics and working with disadvantaged youth in Indian River County, among many, many other things. So we would encourage everyone to pay tribute to both of these gentlemen that are huge losses for our community. And that ends my report, unless you have any questions.
Any questions? I might hold mine till the end, but I'll give you a hint of what it is because I think it might include Dr. DeFries, Dr. Parker, Chuck. You mentioned the space industry, and it is a rapidly growing private industry now in Florida, and it's great for our economy. I'm wondering what concerns we should be aware of and what we can do about it with any environmental factors at the growth in the space industry, because they're right on the lagoon.
Right.
And so I might hold that till
Okay.
to the end and let everybody kind of mull over that.
Certainly.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the STEM Advisory Committee report by Dr. Chuck Jacoby.
Morning, Chuck Jacoby from the Florida Flood Hub, chair of the STEM Advisory Committee. So we likewise met on Tuesday in the afternoon. We welcomed Kevin and expressed our condolences to both Marty Baum and Graham Cox's families and friends. We went through our consent agenda, approving the minutes from the August meeting. We recommend that you accept the budget amendment that you've been presented and to proceed with the RFQ to bolster grant writing services. We likewise heard about the water quality and the wharf study, which, again, as pointed out, is a fairly major change up in that part of the lagoon. And we heard about the NOAA grant that Dwayne had just spoke about. We recommend accepting the revised calendar that Aaron's prepared, receive staff updates, and adjourned at about 3:40. Happy to have any questions if there are any.
Thanks. Brevity. Thank you very much. Citizens Advisory Committee. You're not Captain Frank.
Nope, I never am, but you got me today. So the Citizens Advisory Committee met yesterday up in our offices over across the way. Graham Cox was a member of the CAC, so that was sort of a loss for them, and they were expressive about that. We also heard a presentation from the Marine Discovery Center about one of the small grants that they were awarded last year, and this was Project Plankton. And it's a citizen science effort where they are having adult volunteers, adult scientists, go out and collect plankton and count it and catalog it. And then they're going out to school kids with these live plankton exhibits where the kids will sit down at microscopes and be able to count and look at plankton and sort through it and discover things about them. It's a really great project. They have done over, was it 1,000 school kids? About 1,200 maybe. Super good program with a very little amount of money. So that was one of our small grants last year. So this one is coming to completion, and they are looking to keep that going in the future. CAC also recommended approval of the budget for 2025, the updated calendar, and the RFQ for grant writing. And that is it.
Thank you. Any questions? Dr. DeFries.
I'm going to take a moment. All of you have been involved for like 2 years when we were trying to amend Sunshine Law in order to allow for hybrid meetings. I want to thank Aaron and my entire staff. We are fully wired on the second floor now over in the school building, and we are hearing from all of our volunteers, it's almost 100, how much they appreciate being able to dial in legally and engage, from a remote location. So it's working really well. And, because we just went through our election, I just want to thank Thad Altman, former Senator Debbie Mayfield, Tom Wright, because had we not had that support, we would still be having everybody drive. And those of you who come from North Volusia and way down in the south part of Martin, it's a long haul up there. So I just wanted to make that recognition and let you know that our volunteers deeply appreciate the ability of not having to get on I-95 and drive down for our meetings. And it's working really, really well. And thanks staff for all of the maneuvering it takes to get a building wired for a decent hybrid Zoom meeting. It's not simple.
Thank you for that update. And that brings us to item 9, the consent agenda. Does any board member have an item they'd like to pull for discussion or a vote? If there's not, I'll ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented and revised by staff with addition of Holly Sweat to replace Dr. Paul on the STEM AC. Can I get a motion? We have a motion by Bob, and who was the second by? All the way at the end from Libby. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the consent agenda is passed unanimously. Do you want to go over any of the new appointments, just to mention them? Or are we good? It's all on the consent agenda, Tom.
Yeah, I think you have backgrounds. We're thrilled to have our new members. We have not had a lot of turnover over the last decade, but when we do replace all of those, for those of you who haven't been with us, whether it's the Citizen Advisory Committee, the Science Advisory Committee, anytime we do a replacement, we bring them through you for final adoption. And I haven't checked, but I think we're close to 100 volunteers now. And I'm gonna brag. I would be willing to bet we are the biggest and most impressive assemblage of scientists anywhere in the state of Florida. I think we're at 33 research organizations, each represented by an individual scientist. I can't think of a network consortia anywhere close to that anywhere in the state. So we're really happy to have those folks willing to volunteer and do the hard work that we do, both in the science. Everything you see goes through them and not staff before it comes to you. So, and if you want additional bios, we can give you more information, but they're in your package.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 10, we don't have any old business. Item 11 is new business, the fiscal year 2025 final budget amendment. And Dr. DeFries, this is going to take you a while to go through this. So.
Actually, I'm going to kind of give you the high points on this budget, but for those of you who are new, when we amend budgets or finalize budgets by Florida statute, that has to be done by resolution. I think you all do that in your districts and the county. This is a fiscal year 2025 final budget amendment, and thankfully, I have Dan Kolodny, our COO, who really drives into the details of budget, and we ran through this with our finance subcommittee, the management board last week, and also the CAC. So I want to hit some high points because there are not a lot of changes, but there are some that are important for you to know. And unlike Dan, who kind of occasionally will just run through the line items, I want to spend just a minute on revenue. And I've had a lot of questions, not just since the election, but coming into this meeting, about where do we stand, looking forward. And so we are in great shape when we look at our current fiscal year. Federal Section 320 dollars, we have our grant award finally, and so we have $850,000 this year. That is no change from the previous year, and there were cuts in a number of agencies this past year. We weren't one of them. Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, that is a 5-year program coming through EPA. We track revenues and expenditures separately on that, but we are receiving $909,800, and so no change in that since August, nor do we expect changes moving forward. The big change from August is the addition of the NOAA funding. And if you look at your detail, some people were saying, well, why wasn't it split? If you got $9.4 million, why didn't you deliver that evenly across 3 years? And the answer is we started to look at the work plans of all of our 10 partners, and we are front loading the front budget in hope that permits go quickly, construction starts quickly. I don't have any expectation that we will expend that line item, but we will not have to come back to you or hold anybody up if in fact projects move faster than we think. Any of those dollars that aren't expended in this fiscal year will be forwarded into the next fiscal years until totally expended. License plate, every year we just hold it at $125,000. We have no idea how many of those plates get sold. We've seen a little bit of an uptick in sales, but not as much as we had hoped. Member contributions, I want to mention this a little bit because there have been some changes, not in the dollar figure, but in the process. So in August, you all passed the 5-year renewal of our interlocal agreement. What is different, and this started 2 years ago in part, and this year in total, is that the contribution from the St. Johns River Water Management District, which is $500,000 under the interlocal, and South Florida Water Management District, another $500,000, has been combined underneath DEP, who is committed in the interlocal for $250,000. And so we are now receiving, as of this fiscal year, a single check from DEP that covers both water management districts. And so it's a little shift in the flow of money from the state to us. I honestly think, as I thought about that change, that with the passage of the Indian River Lagoon Protection Program as part of the governor's 2306 executive order, this actually adds another layer of at least legislative language in our partnerships with both the water management districts and also FDEP. One other point I want to make, and this is a little bit of bragging rights, but it is a reality check. we are operating, thanks to your contribution under the interlocal, at the exact same amount that you committed back in 2015. We have not added any or asked for any additional monies from any of your agencies since the very first articulation of that interlocal agreement. And if you look year to year at the growth of our program, the amount of output and deliverables, you know, and you think about 10 years of no change in base funding, I think that's a pretty amazing testimony, mainly to my staff and our partners who just keep delivering year to year, you know, with the funding that we've had. And I can't think of that example almost anywhere. And so I'm not saying I'm not going to come back at some point and go, you know, could you help us a little more? But right now we are delivering, I think, a great return on investment for you as investors in the interlocal agreement. And so total expenditures are largely shifting because of the NOAA contribution. Any questions on revenue? All right, expenditures are fairly straightforward, and you have detailed information both in the narrative, in the backup materials for the, you know, for the resolution, but I just want to showcase the highlights of the changes from August. And so under expenditures, we are going to see a net increase of $118,267 on expenditure, and you will see a concomitant decrease in our fund balance end of year. And that change is really in 4 line items, and I'll go over those briefly. Under increase in other expenditures, we're looking at an increase of $86,114, and also $52,114, and that, or $49,000. I need to get new glasses after all these chemo treatments, and none of them work. So what we're looking at here is $86,114 total. Priority community, which was a ledger change. You remember in our audit, we had a timeline challenge with EPA. Those bill funds were behind us moving a contract. We did not want to get into a federal compliance issue, and so we just shifted that expenditure from EPA, resolved the EPA conflict, and used our local cost share interlocal dollars. The other component of this is $52,000 with our partnership with University of South Florida, and that is you probably remember, I think we go back to May, that is our agreement with DEP, but a contract agreement with University of South Florida to keep Chuck working for us over here on the Indian River Lagoon. And so this is his 2nd year of that arrangement with University of South Florida. And I'm going to just thank Chuck because he never says no, and he's not tracking, you know, how much time he spends with us. And this week, this is his 2nd day and 3rd meeting, and so he's earning his keep, but we're really happy to have that expertise. If you look at item 2, increase in salaries and benefits, there's an increase of $28,270, and that is a bump up for my staff, both related to the increased workload of the NOAA grant and merit pay. And just so you know, there are dollars coming through that NOAA grant that are accounting for some of our commitment of our salary, about $124,000 each year. And so this was the delta or difference between what I wanted to do for staff as my recommendation as an executive director, make sure they're rewarded for the successful $9 million, but also know that we appreciate the work to come, because this is a major change in their workloads. Item number 3 on the ledger sheet, which I'm still just shaking my head how he did it. When we were projecting increases in insurance back when, you know, back in March in the preliminary budget, we were off $883 on that projection. And I don't know how Dan got to that, but, you know, we were surprised it wasn't more. And lastly, a $3,000 increase in our negotiated annual rate with special district services. That is embedded in our contract as an annual incremental increase rather than coming back to you to renew contract year to year. So with that, I'll just take questions. The overall impact to our budget, again, is $118,267 on the expenditure side from our August board meeting. Mr. Chair?
Any questions from anyone else? There's no doubt that the workload has greatly increased. Hopefully that will reflect on results. There's so much work to be done. I'm sure you have talked to your staff and they will accept an increase in pay, even though it might affect their income tax at the end of the year?
This is a pretty modest increase, and you know, thanks to your support, you know, we had a cost of living back in August, and so some of them, this is probably a surprise, but this was my request to you as an executive director. And just for the record, I am not taking any increases. So any of these changes are just staff and not myself.
Yeah. And the truth is, no one on your staff is overpaid.
That is correct.
This is much needed. So any other questions from anyone on the council?
Mr. Chair, I just want to share one other point, which is relatively new on the workload for us. As you all know, we do independent audits every year. The audit for 2024 has already started, so we are beginning to do due diligence and disclosures. Back about a year ago, we had an EPA Region 4 audit of some of our grants with EPA. And then just in the last month, we had a phone call from the EPA kind of at the higher level. This is and we have not done one of these before. This is coming through the Office of Inspector General. And next week, Dan and I and Kathy will have our first call with them, but we are having an audit that's focused on the bipartisan infrastructure law, the dollars expended to date. And so, as all of you know, these audits take a lot of time, but you know, we have a lot of due diligence on oversight, both in quarterly meetings, quarterly reports, and so this will be our third audit in 12 months, and we're already starting this past year now. So we'll be busy with audit issues as well on the financials and keep you posted.
Okay. If there's no questions from anybody, I will ask for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Fiscal year 2025 budget. I heard a second on this end?
Second.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And your budget is
Thank you.
passed. Well done in Dan's absence. And 11B is the IRL Council meeting calendar. You're going to update us?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good morning. The calendar that had originally been sent in your packets is no longer valid because I inadvertently had scheduled a meeting in in November on Veterans Day for our Finance Committee,
Yes.
Management Board and SIM Committee. So luckily, this space was available, so we moved that up. We choose our dates on the availability of this space, and then we backtrack for our other dates. In May, you'll notice that the Citizens Advisory Committee meets a week early. That's because they're responsible for the small grants program. So it gives them an opportunity to do the final work on that, then present that to staff, gives us our opportunity to then prepare the final documents to bring forth to the meetings the following week. So these are the dates and the times are all listed. Any questions?
Doesn't look like it.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
And we have a motion to approve the updated calendar and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion carries. Before we move on, Dr. DeFries, can I ask you to come back up? I have one question, really not about the budget, but I know you've never said you can foretell the future, but there's just a political change in the U.S. We have a brand new administration, a lot of changes in the House and the Senate. Do you have any idea, any anticipation of how this new administrative staff will affect what we do here?
I'm going to start locally and move my way up to the really tough question, which is the federal. So one member who has been with us since day one is Chris Sadowski in St. Lucie County, who did not get reelected. And so we're really happy to, have representation. Each of you at the counties, I think starting this next week, chairs will be reappointing members on the committee. So I don't see at this time any major concerns. We have great relationships with all the counties. We may see a face change or two, but we'll make sure that whoever is appointed, both as an alternate and a primary, get full briefings from me. At the state level, there's been a lot of changes at the state level. And so when you think about our delegation top to bottom, we've got on the Senate side a number of senators who have expressed real support for the Indian River Lagoon through many years. However, the shifting priorities and leadership positions are still, somewhat uncertain. And we've had a few shifts that are big for us. So Senator Debbie Mayfield, when she was in the Senate, was a major player in both legislation and appropriation and supporting, the governor's initiatives for water. She has now moved to the House. And so I will, as soon as things settle down, begin to have those discussions with our new legislative folks and also some of the leadership changes that some of them are happening as we speak. But committees have already started. And so those of you who are thinking about legislative budget requests at the local level, also legislative shifts, you don't have a whole lot of time to get moving forward. And at that level, what I have said every year, and I'll say again, if you're moving either legislation that relates to the lagoon or you're asking for a legislative budget request, have your intergovernmental folks let me know what you're asking for. So if I'm wandering around the hallways in Tallahassee and somebody asks, why is this county asking for this much money, I'm not caught totally off guard because I have no idea. And that has worked well, just in a general sense. Where on the financial side, I think we need to pay close attention is Governor DeSantis, and I say this without any hesitation, has been the best water governor, the best investor in water infrastructure and water quality. I've been here 43 years. We've had a lot of support for the environment, but we have never had the level of investment that we've seen over his, 2 terms. He is now moving towards the end of term 2. And if you remember Executive Order 2306, in the creation of the Indian River Lagoon Protection Program, which we are named in that legislation, the request that came with it that the House and the Senate would support $100 million a year for the Indian River Lagoon. I think that's something we're going to have to watch and support the governor and the legislature to make sure that those appropriations continue to advance the incredible work that's being done and also the leveraged work that's happening in your counties and some of our cities with the competitive grants program that DEP offers over the last 2 years. So I'm optimistic that we're moving forward. We've got a governor who supports the lagoon and we've got a House and the Senate with many returning members who have been there for us for many years. Congress is a little more difficult to predict. If you get wrapped up in the rhetoric right at the moment, it's easy to have your head spin. Is there going to be disruptive change? And I'm not going to say positive or negative, but the answer is yes. We have been through administrative changes before, and the one thing I can say with assurance is that we have had strong bipartisan support, at least for the 10 years that I have been leading the council. And just as a reminder, when I first was hired by you, our federal appropriation through Section 320 in the Clean Water Act was $600,000. So that what was coming through EPA to us is the federal contribution. We have had incremental increases since then, not transformational, and definitely not at the potential limit that's authorized. So in, I think it was January of 2021, the then President Trump signed into law our reauthorization, which is 5 years. That reauthorization allowed for $50 million in authorized funding, an increase from, if I recall, 24.5 or 24.6 million, almost doubled our authorized amount. That does not mean that because you're authorized that you're getting an appropriation at the full amount, and we have not. But if you looked at the numbers, we have gone from $600,000 to $850,000 a year in Section 320. I think we're going to be stable on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which was bipartisan, that $909,800. We are already in this budget year, and so I think we are comfortable going in through 2025. Two things are going to happen, though, and we're started these discussions already at the Association of National Estuary Programs, is that we are due for reauthorization in 2026. We need to make an evaluation. I mean, we, the collective 28 national estuary programs that are in the Clean Water Act, and a possible new one that has been recommended that came literally through support from Senator Rubio's office for Perdido, Pensacola Sound. And so we are going to have to work to educate new faces in new places, and I am going to use this as a political thank you. We have had incredible congressional support within the Indian River Lagoon watershed, you know, from Congressman Brian Mast, from Senator Marco Rubio, from now retiring Bill Posey, who was co-chairing with Brian Mast on the bipartisan House Estuary Caucus. But if you're paying attention to the last 48 hours, many of our strongest supporters are leaving their posts to join, you know, appointments for the new president. And so we will be looking at gubernatorial appointments, at least on the Senate seat, special elections coming up on the House side. We'll have to see how everything sorts out, but I never take this lightly. You have given me full authority to represent you. We are not allowed to lobby by law. The Hatch Act prohibits that, but both as your scientist and your executive director, we are available to provide as much information as asked from congressional offices, but I do think we need to communicate clearly what we do, how we do it, how effective and efficient we are, and also at least address the kind of the new language of the moment that's being driven largely by hurricanes and floods. That, you know, we are not just an environmental group. You know, we've got our workload in workforce development. I'm going to tell you in my report that I've spent a lot of time with Space Force. I was just up at Kennedy Space Center. So the one beauty of the National Estuary Program, as envisioned by Congress over 30 years ago, was the idea of a management conference of stakeholders and the ability to take the federal investment and then leverage it at local, state, and also private to do way more than what the federal government would do on its own, and also make sure that we're addressing the local needs, the local priorities, and the local challenges. So I wish I could give you more than that, other than you can't sit back and wait. We need to be, again, having an active presence in Washington, an active presence with the Association of National Estuary Programs, and also walking the hallways up in Tallahassee with our House and Senate members, and continuing the amazing partnership we have with our state agencies. So with that, I'm going to just say, if you're up there, if you're a county and you're walking the hallways, and I'm available, I have done that in the past. I'm happy to take those hallway walks with you if you want somebody to talk Indian River Lagoon from the science side. We don't weigh in on appropriations. We don't weigh in on, the language of new legislation unless we are specifically asked to provide technical support. So hopefully, that's all the crystal ball I have right at the moment.
That's pretty good.
And who knows what happened while we've been sitting here.
That's true. I appreciate that update, because it is a concern. I met with Representative Massey in Kentucky at a farm conference, and he was very encouraged by what he's hearing from the new administration coming in environmentally. And in fact, on the opposite side of the mountain from him in Virginia, where the conference was, is Joel Salatin with Polyface Farms. I don't know if you've heard of Joel. He's probably a libertarian, Christian, conservative, environmentalist, brilliant guy, and the president is talking with him about being involved somehow in the farm. I don't know if it'll be USDA, EPA, but it's agriculture and farming and how that affects our quality of life. So that was really encouraging. But you're right. Any contact we have with from the local level to DC, we need to keep expressing the importance of what is happening here in this room and keep our funding intact. Thank you for your insight. Any other questions, observations?
Thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to item 12, staff reports. We'll start with Kathy Hill and the community engagement update.
Great. Hello again. So here are our Facebook metrics for the last quarter. So this goes from July through September. Notice that our reach is up to 2.8 million, which is great. We're super happy about that. You'll notice that the ad information is sort of a flat line there on the bottom. That ad campaign has run its course for the year, so we're not going to be doing any more of that this year. But the great news is that most people find us organically. So they're finding us either through the tags that we leave on our social content, through the ads when we do have them, through check-ins, through profile visits, and things of that nature. So that's all good news on Facebook, and our engagement is pretty good there. Instagram, our reach is about 53,000, which is great. Notice we do still have an ad campaign at that point going. That was for the license plate. So the reach kind of splits. It's not even. Most people still find us organically. Most people on Instagram find us through advertising, and then about 20,000 through just organically coming on. So again, happy with the reach, happy with everything there. This was our top post. Notice the 4,344,000 plays. So that was a viral one that went for us. That was a day out in the field where Jesse was out with the Marine Resources Council and the Reef Arches people looking at, they were planting mangroves and also looking at oyster recruitment on the reef arches, and you can see the picture of that there. So really great engagement on that post. We had over 14,000 reactions, almost 15,000 reactions to it, 93 comments, which was huge for us. I do want to call your attention to our podcasts. So we just completed season 2 of our podcasting. There are 20 episodes out there now. And if you can get them wherever you get your podcasts from, so whether it's Apple Music or Spotify, wherever, but they're also on our website. So we have a podcast tab on the main page of the website. So if you have interest, you can just go there and call up any one of these. And we focused last year on projects and projects equaling progress. So we picked out 8 really great projects that we've been working on and had the folks come in and do a podcast with us, and it turned out really well. We've just had our 25,000th download for that. So happy with those. We're going to give you some highlights from now on of what the CECs are up to. So these are our community engagement folks. So these are Jessie's from the Northern Lagoon. And she did more than the presentations you see here. They all have. We just picked out a few highlights, either because the audience was really interesting or the audience size was really big. So she did 4 really great presentations to, one was Rotary Club, one was the Sailing Club of Cocoa Beach. She went back to her alma mater to an old professor's class and gave a talk there, and also did the Volusia County Science Kickoff event. She went to 2 conferences for us. One was the International Conference on Shellfish Restoration that happened on Jekyll's Island in Georgia. That was a 3-day conference. She worked on that really hard, did some great social posts from there, so those went over pretty well. And she also went to MRC's Action Assembly that happened in August, I think. Events-wise, she did the mangrove planting, and you can see the photos here from the Reef Arches event at MRC. Supporting our partners, she sits on the steering committee for the statewide shoreline restoration plan, and also the steering committee for the North Estuarine Research Team. You might know that as NERT. So,
Kathy,
doing good things for us. Yeah.
what's the location of the top picture?
That is MRC.
Okay, thank you.
And that's in Palm Bay, just over the bridge over Turkey Creek. From the Central Lagoon, these are Heather's highlights. She did 11 presentations. 7 of them were on restoring balance to the IRL. Those are adult presentations. She also has a great program for kids that she does where she reads Dr. Seuss's The Lorax to them and then does these connections to lagoon issues. She participated in Brevard Zoo's Science Sundays, the Zoo Teacher Open House, which is a great event for teachers in Brevard where they can come out, they get free resources, and have the opportunity to talk to outreach people about projects and programs that are going on. She also did the city's Touch and Tour event that happened right here out in the parking lot. And that was a big event for kids where they can come out and, climb on fire trucks and get on the big equipment and kind of see what all that's about. She was a park champion for us at International Coastal Cleanup, so she did Riverside Park in Sebastian with the city. And she has been out with the zoo monitoring seagrass restoration projects in Brevard. Kalita has several presentations that she does. These are 3 of her highlights. So she did the Fort Pierce Council of Faith Leaders. She did the St. Lucie Education Foundation and Fort Pierce Women's Club. She also does a program called Lagoon Yoga, where she's a yoga instructor, and we have this great program that University of Central Florida did for us, or with us several years ago. So she takes that and does these poses that are sort of lagoon focused. So we have oyster yoga. And so that has been going over really well. She did a lot of those this summer with kids and community groups. She was a site captain at Treasure Coast Waterway Cleanup and also Coastal Cleanup, for International Coastal Cleanup. She did Estuaries Day at Florida Oceanographic. And in supporting partners, she is with the Fort Pierce Youth Council. She is training in the Beyond Plastics. It's a grassroots training. You can Google that if you have interest. It's a really great program. She did the workshop on Florida hard clam seed production. and has been monitoring seagrasses with FOS, Florida Oceanographic, down in Martin County, and has been working on the, with Florida Sea Grant on the shoreline characterization that's going on down there. I want to call your attention to our fiscal 24 total. So these are the metrics. What you see in the graphic are the metrics just for last quarter. I tallied all of those up for fiscal 24, and you can see that they did 684 engagements last year for us. Just for comparison, before we had them on board, Dwayne would give maybe 100 to 125 talks and programs, things of that nature a year. I would do probably 50 to 75, Dan would do some, but we can't touch that total. So this is, it's a great thing for us, and it has really expanded our outreach into the community. Just to give you a heads up, calendars are, or have been folded, and they've been printed, they've been folded, and we don't know exactly where they are, but we're expecting them any moment now. They're going to be delivered to the offices, county offices in Vero Beach for in Indian River County. They have offered us storage space for the very brief time that we need storage. So those go out very quickly into the community. That's happening. Annual report is online, so it's already available online. We're going to have hard copies for you very soon. We were hoping to have them for today, but it didn't quite, the timing didn't quite work out. So we expect those anytime now, and you know, you can expect a delivery at your office sometime soon. And that is all for me.
Any other questions?
I'm going to stay here though and be KJ next. So.
Okay. How can everyone up here get some of those calendars?
Let us know. Just email Erin or myself, and we can, yeah, we'll make sure some boxes get delivered to you. And just let us know how many you want.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Very much. Are you doing the next report too?
I'm doing KJ's because KJ is in Texas.
Okay.
We didn't bring her out this time, just saving money on travel. But KJ has been doing a super great job for us. These are her highlights for the quarter. She worked on 2 webinars this quarter. She's our webinar organizer, and she does the whole technical back end of things for that. But we did 2 great webinars, one with Restore Our Shores, and one with Smithsonian Marine Station at Fort Pierce. They did sort of a Halloween-themed one for us on the kind of microbial creatures and plankton that could have sort of Halloween, like skeleton shrimp and things of that nature. It was a really fun webinar. That is on our YouTube channel. If anybody has interest, you can go to our YouTube channel. You'll see it there. She completed ADA compliance along with the rest of the staff. So all of our staff took a course in ADA compliance. Everybody has been certified. She is getting her Master Gardener certification certificate, so she's going to be a certified Master Gardener for us. And she assisted the county. So this was Indian River County is hiring a new land asset and data manager. They asked for KJ's expertise in kind of assessing qualifications, so she helped them out with that. And then she's been working super hard on the required monitoring plan and data sharing plan for NOAA, and that's been taking up the bulk of her time in the last probably 2 months. And that is it for her.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
And for our last 2 reports, Dr. DeFries will update us on the IRL project update and then his executive director report.
So unlike Dan, who loves to cherry pick 1 or 2 of his very, very favorite projects, there are too many projects complete in the last 90 days. I couldn't make up my mind, so I'll just skim through the list. They're in your backup package. But we are excited because we have completed a lot of projects, including projects that had been for a while sitting in, you know, non-reimbursed extensions, no-cost extensions for whatever reason. So we've completed 26 projects, and we saw you the last time. 15 projects are still in progress. 26 new projects will begin in 2025. So that alone, we're at 41 projects before we even look at NOAA. So we've got a heavy load of project management coming forward. I'm just going to skim through these. The backup is in your, in your package, but just a skim, you can see kind of how our categories of RFPs step down into a really profound, if not robust, assemblage of projects that are water quality, habitat restoration, community engagement in restoration, science and innovation, small grants, and right now all of those are active RFPs, so the Notice of Funding Opportunity is live right now, including our new category that was made available from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law funding to support our 26 priority communities that we identified through the EPA process. And so when you start to look at the delivery system and you look back across, the last 10 years, and by the way, all of these new projects that are completed will be added to our story map. So we have the NOAA project story map that is separate from our ongoing projects. And so as these get reviewed with their final reports, you can go onto the story map, hit any one of these projects, not only see a summary of the project and where it was, how much was spent, but also take a look at the documentation, including the final report information for every single project. And so we are really starting to assemble quite the inventory of projects over these last 10 years. And that's it for the project report. It's as many projects that have completed in a quarter that I can remember at any time since we started. And we're excited to, we like to see the money come in and the money go out and the projects get completed. And this was a great quarter for completion.
Questions? Thank you very much.
All right, my staff reports, you can see what I did the last 90 days in your package. I'm not going to go through it. There are a few things, though, I want to update you on that are significant, including one that isn't on this list. Last week, we had a visit, thanks to a call several months ago from a representative then, now retired, Todd Hopkins from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service said, we've got a group of federal agency leaders who I've been meeting since 1984. It's called the Southeast Natural Resources Leadership Group. And every year they meet twice a year, once in, face-to-face meetings and once in Zoom, I assume. I had never heard of this group before, which is strange because I've been around for a long time. And they asked the question, we want to come to Florida. We would like to do a site visit. And our theme for this fall meeting is difficult challenges, innovative solutions. And they were kind of looking at South Florida, no offense, Libby. But he said, you guys have been down to the Everglades a lot. You want a challenging, discussion? I said, why don't we look at Kennedy Space Center and the growth, to your question earlier, Mr. Chair, the growth of commercial space, the growth of the amount of launches, the long-term plan for major expansions at Port Canaveral. And so they came in last week. They were here for 2 days. The first day was just their meetings among each other to talk about some of the really big challenges facing the nation, one of which, and they were case study analyses looking at just the federal emergency and recovery response from catastrophic events. Those of you who are from Brevard County, we hosted them at Dixie Crossroads. Laura Lee Thompson, one of our multi-generational, experts on the lagoon, told about her family. Many of them never had a rock shrimp, so that was very fun to watch. But the next morning, we convened at Space Florida headquarters. Space Florida joined us as a co-host. And we started the day with a download of where Kennedy Space Center, not where it's going in the future, but where it is right now. And so if you're up here, we're doing launches a couple times a week. Where we're headed next year is probably over 100 launches. Where we're headed down the line, short term, is maybe as many as 300 launches, on the rockets you're seeing now, but as many as 48 heavy lift. A massive expansion of workforce. We were able to tour by bus with, restricted access, Space Florida manufacturing, and that was an incredible, if you get a chance to go in there and see the next generation of rocket technology, SpaceX, it's just mind-boggling. And my family comes from aviation and aerospace. I'm used to looking at that kind of facility. I've never seen a facility like that. 8 rockets with engines, all being serviced simultaneously, all with the highest technology you can imagine. We also did a tour of Blue Origin and also Boeing. Then we all jumped into a bus and had a long bus ride with stops discussing kind of the challenges of having a commercial and also government launch platform. And this isn't NASA anymore alone. This is NASA. This is SpaceX, Blue Origin, the commercial launch folks, but it's also Space Force, the DoD piece of space. And it's also every entity that's coming to support this effort, including the need for more wharf space at Port Canaveral, which has got a long plan, multi-billion-dollar plan to expand the port. And so we were in the bus together. I was the only really outsider other than the federal agencies. And I want to, take this moment to thank Space Florida, their leadership. They don't need to bring me into the room, but it was really an honor and a pleasure. But the discussion was high level. They weren't trying to solve just the immediate problems. And I'll share just, 2 of the discussion points. And they're very similar to what South Florida Water Management District and DEP and the counties are dealing with Everglades. Large, expensive, multi-year, incredible infrastructure, both capacity needs and infrastructure needs for construction and growth, an absolute dependency on having local, state, but also federal funding. And in this case, the driver is private launch. The players are all there, but there isn't any single entity, maybe Space Florida ultimately, that's kind of controlling the big picture. And so you heard from our advisory group chairs that we brought them in for a pretty deep dive on launch. If you would like to have them come in to give you a presentation after the first of the year, we're happy to bring them in. Every week it changes up there. And I was up there about 2 months ago, and there's new buildings coming out of the ground already with multiple stories. And I know DEP's right in the middle of this on permitting and the large discussions. But to your question, this will be a transformational change, not just for Indian River Lagoon, not just for the state of Florida, but for the nation. And it is happening as we speak. And so my goal was just to be in the room, throw some spaghetti when I get a chance to, tell them what we know about the Indian River Lagoon and its sensitivity. And I'm happy to say that they are listening. But getting from talking about it to actually figuring out, what this is going to look like and where the conflicts are, how it moves forward, that's going to be the great challenge. And that has been the challenge with all large water management, especially Everglades restoration. So before I go on, any questions just on, your interest in what's going on at Kennedy? And then we'll, follow up. Those of you who have been with us for a while, there's two other things going on that are quite big that relate. You remember that we helped Space Coast Economic Development Commission with the very first conceptual study of a new wastewater treatment plant. We just helped on the front end of the RFP. That Black and Veatch report is, been on the street now for a while. That initiative has not slowed. And so Linda Weatherman has funds coming through federal channels to move that, and I believe with some county support. I'm not quite sure where that's at, but that discussion about wastewater treatment is still very active, and the current wastewater treatment capabilities to serve that complex are just insufficient today, much less for the growth to come. But the other is a substantial, over $1 million grant from the federal government to do a military installation resilience review. One was just completed about a year ago for South Florida and the Keys. This is a deep dive in all of the federal facilities, and this current one is going to be Central Florida and the East Coast. They met 2 days this week with their steering committees. I've got Kathy and Dan sitting in on the policy committee and also the technical committee, but that's moving forward as well. And both of that project's going to generate actual projects that will come through, and as soon as that's available, that draft report will make sure those of you who are interested can see it. But yeah, a lot happening on the infrastructure side of things at the federal level.
One of the concerns that I think we need to be aware of in Florida is the introduction of PFAS chemicals into the environment, the lagoon, even the aquifer. Did that come up? Is there any concern with the space industry that they may be contributing to it? Is there ever any evidence that they are, or is it? I'm hoping there's at least concern with that, because
it's more than concern. The EPA set drinking standards for PFAS, PFOA compounds that are very strict. There are no, I'm going to look at Wade, I don't know of any standards that are set at the moment, for, concentrations, in the environment. Have we gotten there?
EPA released benchmarks for PFAS for aquatic life.
Okay, aquatic life benchmarks have been issued, and this is not what I think I know. We have PFAS contamination at Kennedy Space Center. We probably have it at every airport, anywhere that anybody in the fire, suppression world has done any kind of training and testing. You're going to find that. The scary thing about PFAS is a, very, that we call them a legacy compound, is that if you look, you'll find it. It's everywhere. It's in wastewater. It's in, stormwater. It's in ground. The University of Florida, and I believe this study is completed, got a EPA grant. It was a little over $800,000. I'm thinking 2 years ago. It was with the STARS grant program, and they were looking at hot spots. PFAS is one of those compounds that we are going to be working on, for decades. The front end is challenging. How do you get it out of, first the U.S. manufacturing, but if it's coming through our supply chains from other places, how do you control that? And I won't name the brand, but I just bought myself a very expensive stormware from one of the really good rain gear fishing, and there was this warning. This rain gear was manufactured with PFAS. And if you happen to have cancer like I do, it's like, how do I send it back or just not worry about it? So yes, it's an issue. It is an issue that's going to plague us for a long time, and remediation is going to be technically challenging, spatially challenging, and it's not the only contaminant that, you know, we talk about and worry about. And so I don't think that goes away. And if you're in the utility business, you know, every utility, my personal advice is if you haven't, you know, looked at the EPA guidance, if you haven't looked at the new standards, and I will say this, I've said this in public before, AWT, advanced wastewater treatment, as we know it today, is not sufficient for where we need to go in the 21st century. Where we need to go is no pollutants to air, no pollutants to water, surface waters, no pollutants to groundwater. And that includes all the pharmaceuticals that pour through every wastewater treatment plant that we haven't even started tracking in some cases. So if you would like, or your staffs want to do kind of a deep dive on PFAS, tell them to contact me. I've got a stack of published papers, you know, that I'm happy to share, but it's complicated. It's going to be very expensive to remediate a ubiquitous compound like that.
Thank you. But we can't put it off because it's just going to get, it builds up and builds up. And you mentioned cancer, the increase in cases of cancer really around the country is troubling. So
it is troubling, but just to put a, you know, kind of a caution on this, toxicology is really complicated. Yeah. You know, it's not just the presence of a toxicant. It's, you know, what is the concentration? What is the exposure? You know, is it ingested? Is it breathed? Is it through skin? And so trying to get to those standards, and the EPA's been working on this for a while. So it is not easy to set a standard that has the, you know, the power of the science where you're really feeling comfortable, you know, that you've got enough data to be able to assess risk. And it's human health risk, it's environmental risk, and wildlife risk on the front end. But many of you who are either around zoos or aquariums, and this is a 20-year-old concept, the concept of One Health. This is one of those concepts where if the environment's polluted, you know, human health is at risk. And they're all connected, and we can't kind of just look at one and not look at the entire system. But the key is don't put it in the environment in the first place. Yeah. You know, because once it's out there, it's really hard to claw that problem back.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, a couple of quick ones. I rarely talk about science, but you kind of dragged me into that conversation. And I just wanted to show you what we've been working on for the last few years as it relates to the 2011, you know, super bloom, the loss of seagrasses. And so back 2011, for the following 9 years, you know, we saw catastrophic damage to water quality, seagrasses. You know, we started to see that in 2021 with manatee, unusual mortality event. You know, we're not through the impacts of that, even though water quality, you saw how much it's improved, even in some areas. And so there's a lot of reports coming from some of our dolphin folks doing research that we are still seeing malnourishment in the food web. But if you are interested in the science, thanks to Chuck Jacoby's leadership and a number of our partners within the NEP, we created a special issue in Frontiers of Marine Science, which is a peer-reviewed scientific journal. To date, 17 articles have been published, and if you read them in sequence from the little critters to the really big critters, you'll get a good idea how a harmful algal bloom can run through all the way up the food web and impact a whole bunch of species, including species we didn't pay much attention to in the big picture when you have, you know, manatees dying. But there's also a couple papers on muck flux, and that can get kind of controversial at times, the dredging, but there's some really excellent, you know, papers. But look at the number of downloads. And so the downloads total are very much similar to the downloads that we're seeing annually. 9,000 plus downloads, 50,000 total views of those papers. Manuscripts we're still taking manuscripts, and we're going to keep it open until we think we've exhausted the activity. And then the last manuscript, Chuck and I and a few others are going to put together a summary manuscript. But we don't talk much science, but we are deeply embedded in promoting scientific research in the peer review world. I mentioned the Southeast Natural Resources Leadership Group already, but I put a piece of paper on your desk so you can see, who plays in that world. I'm sure there are going to be leadership changes in those agencies, and a few of those agencies couldn't come down mainly because they're in emergency recovery and response. FEMA was one. There's a lot of folks in the federal, agencies cohort that are, in the most devastated communities. But I will continue to interact with them. I've sent them a number of pieces of information that they wanted to see, and we'll see where that discussion goes. And 2 EPA representatives were in the room with us last week. Just to give you, a heads up on the party, hard to believe we're 35 years old, the National Estuary Program, and we are moving towards our, 2025 will be 10 years old since we created the council. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to roll out a little celebration, but you will start seeing kind of those 10-year summaries starting with some of our outreach and efforts. When you roll it all up, and I did this the other day because I was looking for something, at every annual report, we have come a long way. And I said that this week, and I'm going to say it here, we could not do this without you. And we could not do it without those 100 volunteers who every quarter and then in between, keep driving the progression and also the productivity. So thanks to each of your agencies. Thanks for your investment, but your leadership is the reason we're successful, and your leadership at this dais is what has kept us focused over those 10 years to have the kind of productivity that we've not only already delivered, but the hope of what we're going to deliver still to come. I'm not going to talk about congressional authorization today. We'll get you moving through, but this is what we're going to be debating in authorization. There's 7 line items in Section 320 of the Clean Water Act. We will start the year, even though the tenure of this is 2020 year, even though the tenure of this is 2026. If in fact there's a political atmosphere to move a reauthorization in the next Congress, at least my personal opinion is if we think we have the support, we should move it when we can move it. And we'll keep you posted on that. And then you already heard about our loss. I'm not going to, reiterate that, other than I've had personal and professional interactions with both our icons in the lagoon. For all of us, we've extended our condolences to their wives and families, but it seems like we're getting older, and we're reporting these more than I'd like. But yeah, we've lost a couple of really important people who are advocates for water quality, Everglades restoration, education with kids. And so we just want to extend our condolences to friends, family, and everybody who interacted with both Graham and Marty. I don't want to put Aaron on the spot, but maybe I will. Sean Hamilton, our Secretary of DEP, has stepped down. In his resignation, we have a new Secretary of DEP, someone I haven't met, but I'm excited about the opportunities moving forward, and that's Alexis Lambert. She's just hitting the ground running, probably with less than 7 days, in the appointment. I'm going to do my very best to try to get a meeting, and I already talked to Aaron and said, let me know when, the dust settles. She's got to figure out all of DEP as she's coming on board. But the good news, and I think it's really good news, everybody I've talked to said she's a consummate professional, really expertise in finance and organizational structure, bonding, private-public partnerships, all of which impact the work we do. And so I'm looking forward to working with her, but I do want to say this. During Sean's tenure as secretary, which I think was 3 years, we have never had a better, more productive, more open relationship with DEP. During his 3 years, historic things happened for the Indian River Lagoon and water quality, and that doesn't happen unless you've got alignment between the governor's office, the legislature, and our agencies. I personally am sorry to see him go, but I'm also really happy that, he's kind of moving on in his career. I hope he lands, a place where we can still get at him. But I really do appreciate his friendship, his support, and his guidance, as we have developed this relationship between the council, DEP, very similar to that long relationship we've had with the water management districts. And then lastly, we embarrassed our chair of the CAC. I was kind of hoping we would do it today. He's not here. But our Captain Frank Catino, our chair of our Citizen Advisory Committee, last Friday had one of the City of Satellite Parks named in his honor for 50 years of service, both in the city and the county, over 50 years of fishing guides. And if you need a good guide who knows, Frank is one of those, but also his incredible support of the Indian River Lagoon. And so with that, I'm going to just turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you very much. That was an enlightening and extensive report. And that brings us to council member reports. So I will start at my left with Libby Pigman. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
There we go. Sure. So on Monday at our district headquarters, we're going to be hosting the NEP, the Northern Everglades and Estuaries Protection Program update. And we will have posters with our scientists. That's where we have the coordinating agencies of DEP, FDACS, and South Florida Water Management District to go over all of the projects and programs that are happening for the Northern Everglades, which includes the St. Lucie Estuary. So that's this coming Monday at 9 a.m., and we're excited about that. That's it.
Thank you. Aaron?
Good morning. Thanks, Dwayne, for recognizing Sean's contributions to the department, as well as highlighting our excitement to have Alexis at our lead going forward. So I appreciate that. As we all know, we've had a busy storm season. Too busy, but that's our job and our public service that we're there in response to the storm. And I just want to highlight and commend all the DEP staff for their storm response and coordination through the hurricanes, not only here in locally, but across the entire state. We have a large number of tasks and responsibilities, all which were accomplished successfully. Things like disaster debris management, sites, authorizations for those, compliance and oversight of those operations of those disaster debris management sites. DDMS, I'll say from now on, that's a mouthful. But also water utilities, drinking water facilities, wastewater facilities. We reach out to thousands of water utilities to get operational updates, operational status, make sure that needs are met to provide water utilities to folks in need through the storm, emergency response, beach surveys, and also county EOC engagement. So just a lot of work, and staff did a fantastic job, and we can't thank them enough. That's all I got.
Thank you. Jamie?
Nothing to report, sir.
Well, it's good to have you here. Thanks for participating. You are not Melissa.
No, I'm filling in for Melissa. I'm Eric Charis with Indian River County. Got a few items to update, at least with our outreach programs. We're really trying to ramp up outreach from our Lagoon standpoint. Recently, the Lagoon staff had worked at the Wabasso Causeway to promote the University of Florida's IFAS Seagrass Blitz. In addition, the staff has worked with Orca in their Day in the Life program to promote Lagoon efforts. We did partner with the Vero Beach Elementary 5th graders for that effort, so we're trying to educate the youth in the area. Staff is also participating in science fair judges. It's that time of year where the local school systems do a lot of their good work with their science fair, and we're looking to have our staff out there blanketing some of the middle schools and junior high schools, if you would, with some of the science fair judging. We're also trying to promote scientific efforts in the career day at the local Boys and Girls Club in Vero Beach as well. So in addition to the outreach efforts, the county continues to work with the local municipalities on the establishment of the anchoring limitation areas. We've gotten some agreements back from the municipalities that will partner in that, and the county's next step is to do the Fish and Wildlife postings and move that program forward. So Indian River County is excited to be part of the Habitat Grant, the transformational grant, the NOAA Habitat Grant, transformational grant. I believe we're in receipt of the grant paperwork. We may be one of the ones that has not returned it yet. We're in, just in recent receipt of it, so we're reviewing that. In addition, the county is actually promoting a lot of our efforts on our website too, so we've made some updates to that. One of the items is we've launched a derelict vessel reporting recording site, if you would. Obviously, the county is not an entity that can identify derelict vessels, but we will be collecting the data and working with FWC on that. So that's a new effort, as well as partnering with FIT on bringing a living docks program to the county. So we've got a website that interested citizens can apply for the program, and we will be looking at doing some volunteer events in the near future to create the mats and deploy some living docks here in the county. That's pretty much it.
Great. Thank you. Cole.
Just very briefly, we are excited that we're bringing in probably in the Q1 of next year, the first quarter, the conclusion of the M1 Canal Flow Restoration Project in the Melbourne area, which will divert about 5,000 acres worth of stormwater that is currently going into Lagoon and restoring it to its traditional flood path back to the St. John's. So we're excited to see that, come in for a landing. That's all I have for today. Thank you.
That's good. Rob Feltner.
From Brevard County, Virginia Barker, who leads our Natural Resources Department and our Save Our Indian River Lagoon project plan, sent me a list. So I'll read it quickly. From September to November progress report, work completed this quarter. Leaky lateral repairs, 17 more private sewer leaks repaired for a total of 707 repairs to private lines. Quick connects to existing sewer, 51 more of 716 private connections completed to date. South Central C septic to sewer, 97 more of 131 private connections completed to date. MICO sewer line extension complete and final report submitted to IRL and EP. She says thank you. Brevard County septic to sewer, bidding complete for Sykes Creek Zone M, N, and T, while South Banana Zone B and South Beaches Zone O and P, I'm not sure where all these places are myself, and I've lived there for 29 years, are in the queue for bidding. Construction, septic upgrades, 40 more of 327 septic upgrades completed to date. City of Titusville Riverfront Center nutrient removing filtration boxes complete. City of Cocoa Beach Golf Course stormwater pond vegetation harvesting complete. Brevard County stormwater projects, 2 projects awarded for construction, 1 project bid but rejected, 1 project is out to bid. Titusville Causeway Multi-Tropic Restoration and Living Shorelines Resiliency Project, most of the 660 wave attenuation devices have been poured. Nearshore installation to begin in December. dredged 39,036 more cubic yards of muck from the lagoon. Brevard Zoo Partnership completed construction of a 3,037 square foot oyster reef. University of Central Florida monitoring of 10 constructed oyster bars found 1166 to 4117 oysters per meter square. I think I'm saying that right. Derelict vessels removed 3, however, 36 vessels were sunk by Hurricanes Helene and Milton. Grant reports submitted 31 quarterly reports for active grants. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be brief as well. We are upgrading our Southeast Regional Water Reclamation Facility in Volusia County to an advanced wastewater treatment plant. You kind of burst my bubble when you said that wasn't enough. I agree. But this one cost us $31.5 million, so, and it's definitely a step in the right direction. I'm glad to see it happen. I've already thanked Aaron for the $18.25 million we got from the DEP. He admitted that he can't take any credit for it, but was glad to see that we got it, and I am too, and it's, I'm really happy to see how the DEP works with all the counties with grant money and assistance at every level. It's that's how this needs to work. So we will be increasing plant capacity from 0.6 to 1.2 million gallons per day. And then I just wanted to. You know, I just went through a year-long campaign. It's not, you know, some of us up here are used to that. That's our lives. One of the things that I was able to do in that campaign was talk a lot about the Indian River Lagoon Council. And every time I did, it had a lot of public interest and support. And so I would just encourage all of us, especially at the county level, to talk about the work that goes on here, because this lagoon affects so much of the state. But one of the things that I learned, and I'll never forget, Dr. DeFries, when we had the EPA checkup a year ago, as we talked about, we learned about what all the other NEPs were doing around the country, it became really clear that what we do does not just affect our own lagoon, but it's affecting the ocean. It's affecting the finfish far offshore at our reefs, because we're the nursery for those fish. And then they swim, you know, 80 miles out to the steeples or wherever they're going. So this is critically important, the work that goes on here for life quality and health of not just people that live in Florida, but there's 28 NEPs around the country. It's and we all have similar challenges. So I would just encourage everyone to please promote. We have tremendous tools here that your staff is producing, in the videos, reports, and that I'll wind up with this. You mentioned, Kathy, the license tags. I think we can make them higher, just all working up here. I'm assuming that we can request from you promotional material that we could post online in our own communities and social media to increase sales of that. It just helps raise awareness, but it also raises money. And money is the lifeblood of what we do. And Dr. DeFries, thank you. Through incredibly hard work, through the challenges that you've had, the time that you've spent in treatment, we absolutely can't tell. That, I mean, it's like you're 100% all the time. You always look 100%. So you're in our prayers. And I would just wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. We have a lot to be thankful for, and we have a lot of work ahead. So with that, if no one has anything else, the last thing we need to cover is the next meeting, which will be February 14th, 2025, wow, at 9:30, right here. Anyone have a closing comment?
Do you need a motion to adjourn?
We do. That was my next question. If there's
There you
no
go.
closing comments, would you like to make a motion to adjourn?
Yes, sir. So moved.
Okay. And we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Chair, don't run out. We need to sign that resolution.
Okay.
We'll have the opportunity